Folks, welcome to this conversation on Business Redefined, your weekly, most comprehensive look at the world of business, finance, and economics. Supplementary Budget 1 is already here for FY 24-25, 3 weeks into the new financial year. The context being Finance Bill 24 was withdrawn and there's need for rationalization of expenditure. We are privileged to have Chief Economist at IC Group, Churchill Ogutu. Karibu sana.
Shukran. Thank you.
Churchill, to kick off with the high-level numbers, the president told us anticipate 177 billion worth of cuts. If you look at the supplementary budget, 156 billion worth of cuts there. And there's some 20 billion. We don't know whether we are anticipating it or not. But the thing is this, the deficit coming to about 820 billion, 4.5% of GDP. When you look at it broadly, what do you make of the supplementary budget?
Thanks. A number of things coming out. One is this supplementary budget, the cuts have leaned towards the capex or development spending. Yeah. And remember that we've had a number of announcements from the president and also from the National Treasury. Initially, we were inclined that the austerity will be on recurrent expenditure, discretionary expenditure, basically the operations and maintenance. That's where the biggest cuts will be. But much later, circular dated 5th of July from the National Treasury, it was inclined towards the development spending. I think that's usually the path of least resistance, if you think about it, looking at even the supplementary budgets we saw even in the last financial year. So that came out quite strongly. The other thing is that the cuts, it's coming to around 156.4 billion, but this is to the national government. The president mentioned that 177 billion will be borne equitably. Yes, between the national government and the county governments. So what that tells us that if we are still looking at 177 billion cumulative cuts between the two levels of the government, that means that 20.6 billion will be borne by the national, by the county governments.
And that's the point, Churchill, because if you look at the numbers coming from the Treasury, equitable share is going up from the initial 400 billion to 410 billion. So how do you reconcile these two?
I think that stems to some carryovers. Remember that you've heard that even this particular supplementary budget has some carryovers from the last financial year. I suspect, and even looking at some communication from the Council of Governors, they're alluding to around 30.8 billion being the carryovers or being the arrears from the last financial year, which has been brought to the current financial year. So my quick math is basically 30.8 billion carryovers. So that's an increase to the counties, and then a reduction by 20.6 billion. So that pretty much explains the difference of around 10 though the number is around 10.8 billion increase, but if you do the math, it's around 10.2 billion. But I think largely is explained by a reduction, and also there's some carryovers, hence the difference here.
Interesting point there. And looking at the documents, which again came from the National Treasury, one of the points which then raises question is, when you look at the Finance Bill 24, were we targeting 346.7 billion shillings? Were we targeting 344 billion shillings? Because whereas consistently the mention has been 346.7, including from the president himself, the document from the Treasury shows a slightly lower figure.
Yeah, now that's the thing. You know, the budget making process tends to be a fluid process, but it is quite interesting that at this point in time, even the numbers keeps on changing. So that's another thing that is as confounded as, is it 346.7, is it 344.3 billion? But then also the other thing, and this is my view initially, I was looking at the impact or the net increase in the customs duties. This is the import duties, basically coming from the EAC customs from that particular from that perspective. The increase is 44 billion. So at some point, I was inclined that the 344 billion or 346 billion, whichever number you look at, had also incorporated the customs, because the customs have rolled out as it was from 1st of July from that perspective. So now the question is it even 344, 343, 344 or 346 billion, or is it you reduce by 44 billion and then you get something like 302 billion or 300 billion. So the numbers are flying left, right, center, but I think the confusion needs to come out from National Treasury, and one of the things that needs to come out even in future finance bills processes is the costings. We just need to see individual, line by line, this is the costing. So that will now be able to clear things going forward.
Churchill, when I look at the supplementary budgets, there wasn't significantly a huge departure from the June 14th notice advisory which came from the Treasury to the Clerk of the National Assembly. If you might remember it, he was telling the clerk that, look, if finance bill doesn't sail through, these are the cuts we're looking at. And those cuts were really on core items, JSS, fertilizer subsidy, the milk mop-up. When you look at the final numbers, the last mile connectivity, we haven't really departed from the June 14th advisory, or what do you make of it?
Yes, looking at some of the numbers, the last mile, I think there's a reduction of 14.6 billion.
Correct.
On the Teacher Service Commission, there's a reduction of 10 billion. Initially,
it was 18 or so.
Billion, so it's come down to 10 billion. But some of the things that also caught my eye is some increases. One of them is now the fertilizer subsidy, increasing by 2.5 billion. That is on the development side. CDF.
Cooperatives as well.
Yeah, cooperatives. There's an increase of 2 billion. They explained it, either carryovers on the coffee reforms and that, 2 billion shillings increase. Funny enough, is around Financial Inclusion Fund, which is normally Hustler Fund. There's a reduction by 2 billion. Initially, original budget was 5 billion. It's been reduced by 2 billion.
Correct.
So some of these items takes us to the, brings the question, okay, the president, even as recent as last week, he even touted one of the successes of the current regime is around Hustler Fund. Although some of us, we have different views around it here.
Story for another day.
Story for another day. But then again, you see that even the supplementary, one of the things is cutting is basically this Hustler Fund. So what is coming out from that? So that is also, it's quite confounding, to be honest, what is coming out from some of these, the moves that you've seen, even in the supplementary budgets.
Churchill, there are some changes on the consolidated fund services via supplementary budget, especially in the pensions. Speak to that.
Yeah, majorly, the only difference we've seen is on the pensions. We haven't seen anything around amortization. We haven't debt redemptions. We haven't seen anything around interest payments. But the only difference we've seen is now on the pensions.
And it's going up.
23.8 billion. So it's basically cutting across the normal pension. I think it's increasing by 5 billion. Commuted pensions, another 15 billion thereabouts. And then there's another line item, but pretty much on the pension. So to me, mostly the increase in commuted pension. So basically, if you're getting your normal pension and then you opt to get a one-off or a lump sum pension as opposed to the normal pension. So that speaks to probably the high cost of living or the kind of challenging environment that even the pensioners are going through. Hence, probably a shift of the increased commuted pension by 15 billion from around, I think, 60 billion to around 75 billion thereabouts. So that was something that even caught my eye in this consolidated fund services item.
Churchill, in the build-up to the supplementary budget, a lot of talk was out here around constituency development fund. And when I was digging in through the numbers, then I put this out on Twitter that, look, guys, it's actually going up. And there was all this uproar from Kenyans. Maybe you can tell us what the supplementary budget now says around CDF and the increase.
CDF initial budget was 63 billion. What you've seen via the supplementary, it's expected to go higher by 5.8 billion. So to
4.8 actually.
5.8.
5.8.
Yeah,
sorry.
68 billion. They are 68 billion. So that speaks to either there are some arrears from the last financial year that they were not able to disburse. We are yet to see the numbers as at the end of June. We are actually expecting the Kenya Gazette last week on Friday, but
it had nothing.
It had nothing actually. So probably we'll see it this Friday. So that to me speaks even to the carryovers that were there last financial year, because based on even the downward revision in the revenue that was there via supplementary too, last financial year. I think it also impacted even the disbursement of this CDF. So that is it's been a hot potato issue.
Yep,
If you need
yep.
to make MPs to arise to something or to act on something, you just touch on that CDF. We've seen it a number of times playing out here. So that was the low-hanging fruit. Potentially you could now see even the supplementary as it is might be passed, but because of this carrot has been dangled to the MPs, basically assuring them that the carryovers will now be honored this financial year.
Churchill, to throw a spanner into the works here, and I know you and I are still waiting for those numbers to see.
Yeah.
So the borrowing plan, how do you see it being calibrated between external and domestic? Because when we're talking about the budget estimates, we saw more leaning towards domestic. When the budget statement was tabled by the National Treasury CS, we saw more leaning towards external. Given these changes, what are your expectations?
My expectation, as it is, as you said, the net foreign financing, by the time it was being tabled, is around 331 billion. Whereas net domestic financing was around 277 billion thereabouts. My thing is that if you look at the external disbursements, some of them are cast in stone. Look at the bilateral loans. I mean, these things have been penciled in, they've been worked out for a number of years, that by this financial year will give you X amount of monies. So I may not see, we are not likely to see major changes on that, and those touches on project loans. When you look at the program loans, we're looking at the multilateral financing. We're talking about the IMF, we're talking about the World Bank, we're talking about the Africa Development Bank. World Bank, we know the high-level financing is the DPO, the Development Policy Operation.
About 1.3 or something?
Yeah, 1.3, 1.2 billion. We got 1.2 billion the last financial year, and it's a series of we expect 2 more disbursements within this particular development policy financing. So probably we're looking at 1.2 billion from the World Bank. We still have this 970 million dollars from the IMF.
From the IMF.
7th to 9th reviews as the program comes to an end. Unless anything changes, we are working with those numbers. Africa Development Bank tends to give us something like 14.5 billion shillings. So from those perspectives, I think the numbers are cast in stone. So what normally moves is normally the net domestic financing, basically doing the heavy lifting. As all the rest have been done. So you expect that now domestic financing will now be able to grow, to increase higher. And now that speaks to even the deficit that we've seen. When the budget was tabled in Parliament in June, we're looking at a deficit of 3.3%, be it 597 billion. Whereas, if you look at the notification by the Speaker, and then there's one of the annexes is the budget summary after the supplementary. It's talking about 3.6%.
It can't work.
It can't work.
No, it can't.
We are not agreeing with the 3.6% deficit. If you sort of square the circle, it doesn't make sense. So, but as it is, we are saying that domestic financing will now be able to do some of the heavy lifting.
And Churchill, to your point, because the President himself spoke last week and did indicate that with the revised numbers post-supplementary budget, we expect the deficit to be at 4.6% of GDP. When I do my math, it comes to about 4.69 initially. So I think the 3.6% is totally off.
Absolutely.
But let's go back to the issue around we could lean more towards domestic financing. And my question, Churchill, is 2 weeks ago, we literally had a failed auction. The government went to the market looking for 20 billion, got 487 million worth of bids, a measly 2-point-something% of performance rate. Come on. How will that work, Churchill?
Remember, that was a tap sale.
That was a tap sale. And it had been reopened a number of times.
That was a tap sale, had been reopened a number of times. And then the period of sale started the last week of the last financial year, and then it was closing the first week in the financial year. At that point in time, even from my colleagues in the industry who sort of look at these numbers, by that time they're still mapping up their strategies for the current financial year, for the current quarter. So the timing might have been wrong. And also remember that even tomorrow, we'll be getting the auction results of this month's bond sale.
Yes.
So I mean, the priority was like, okay, probably this tap sale came a bit too soon.
It was an afterthought.
Exactly. So guys are looking at this month. So let's see the results for that is coming out tomorrow.
Yeah.
For this month's bond auction, at least to be able to tell us. Probably it'll be higher. We'll get the 2% because we've seen even in as much as that tap sale was there, the following day, you saw the T-bill results. I mean, it was...
The 91-day registered very good appetite.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes. So either you can say that the interest right now is skewed towards T-bills. I mean, this from even from a demand perspective, looking at even what is going within the SOEs, the parastatals, we have disbursements to the Housing Development Fund.
Yes.
There's no architecture. So what does it end up into? Gets into T-bills,
yes.
Short end of the T. So this, from a demand perspective, short end has been getting the appetite, and also now probably getting into tomorrow's results will be quite indicative of whether tap sale 2 weeks ago was the timing was off. Yes, one was on off. I'll be more concerned if I see a 2% performance,
which is highly unlikely.
It's highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Churchill. 2 questions now. Where does the supplementary budget post-finance bill being withdrawn leave the IMF program? What options do you see on the table? Because it's still up in the air. And the second question right to that is, do you think the supplementary was a huge predicate to Kenya getting an executive board meeting? Because remember, we finished the 7th review. We're waiting for the executive board to approve the disbursement.
As it is, and even looking at the last review, this is the 6th review, whereby it was finalized. We got the service staff level agreement in November, and then disbursement came in around January, so 2 months time period. This time around, the 7th review has been quite protracted. I mean, we started in April. We waited for like 3 months. Staff level agreement in June, and we're expecting even probably we'll get disbursement this month. But as it is now, the finance bill being shelved off, throwing a monkey wrench on the approval. So probably from an IMF perspective, they are still waiting to see how the numbers will look like after all these things have been done. There's a raft of legislative amendments that needs to be done. First, Parliament is coming back next week.
Yep.
They need also to, first and foremost, to approve the memorandum, presidential memorandum around the finance bill. And then also, the good thing this time around, and we also need to give credit to the National Assembly and National Treasury, is the fact that supplementary budgets have been tabled. We are looking at the numbers right now. Parliament is not even in session. And also, the public can give their input. When was the last time, at this point in time, that guys have given their input
on the supplementary,
on the estimates,
yes.
on the expenditure estimates? These things, I mean, we normally interact with them during the macro sector working group. That's when this whole conversation around the expenditure estimates. But this is a plus that we are seeing. And
also, just to cut you short there, Churchill, to give the government their flowers, this document is so detailed.
Absolutely.
It's so detailed.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, you can see that there's some reforms that is going on here. So, on the legislative side, now, and it looks like by the time even Parliament is coming back, we'll see the Budget and Appropriation Committee report on the supplementary numbers.
Yes.
Probably you can see even a supplementary appropriation bill 2 days, 3 days down the line. So it's a fast track. We need to see amendments on the Division of Revenue Act, County Allocation Revenue Bill. So all that is, even the IMF is keeping an eye on that so that they can sort of get a rough feeling where the FY 24-25 budget will look like before now they could give an approval. It may not go the whole extension. They may not even have the exact numbers. They may not even wait for all these bills to be passed. But as and when they start seeing things moving, probably it will give us an indication as to how the program or the approval will look like. Now to the question is, we've had a number of, even from the investing community, will there be an extension of the program? What will look like post March next year? I see there could be two options. One is either the IMF coming in. Remember that program is coming to an end next year, and as it is, we are having the normal access in the sense that based on our allocation quota, the maximum we can get is 6 times that, our allocation quota. So by the time we are done, as it is right now, we'll max at the 6 times our allocation quota.
Yeah.
And the maximum duration of an extended fund facility is normally 4 years. We started this program April 2021. 4 years coming to an end March 2025. So probably wiggle room, I may not see an extension of the current IMF program, unless now they extend it probably 6 months, 1 year down the line, by not seeing like a 2-year. Yeah. The other thing is now probably just end the program, this on a best case scenario, and then we have a standby arrangement for the outlier, say 18 months after that.
Yeah.
So those are the two options I'm seeing. Either an extension of 1 year of the current program, which might be an exceptional request, or we finish this program as it is, and then we have a standby arrangement, at least now to be able to midwife
the transition out of the program.
Exactly, yeah.
I'd imagine in the standby arrangement scenario, then part of what we'd be looking at is, look, IMF telling us, my friends, you have not hit your revenue targets, you have not hit your restructuring of state-owned enterprises. We've really struggled with those two. Here's some additional runway to see how you then adjust that.
Yeah, now those are the things that potentially might be in what we are looking at even in the next, in the event that even the 7th review has been disbursed. We need to see some numbers or even the commitment by authorities either to stick to the fiscal consolidation towards the revenue raising. So revenue raising measures will still take front and center within the context of an extended IMF program or whatever iteration of the IMF program will be. But then again, I still see the statement that came out from the IMF spokesperson that even going forward, they'll ensure that there's some input even from the public. I don't know how it will be, but I think that even probably it will be a collaborative from the authorities, public input. By the time we are seeing a finance bill, it has already been discussed, and then people now are pretty much sure how the finance bill will look like. But to me, one of the low-hanging fruits is, they can even start with some of these progressive aspects of the medium-term revenue strategy. Reduce value-added tax. It was supposed to be done in the context of Finance Bill 2024.
Yeah.
By 1%, probably those are some of the things that they are to look at, and people will just jump into it.
One of my arguments, and I wrote this article for the Business Daily, was that we need a tax laws amendment bill, because we had a number of proposals in the finance bill, which if salvaged, it really could enhance the welfare of citizens. But I guess that's a story for another day. Let's wrap up our conversation, Churchill. The target for ordinary revenue in FY 24-25 at 2.9T, seeing how KRA performed in the last financial year, that's 23-24, their performance rate came in at 95%. Do you expect a significant change on that? Do you think we shall retain it and hope that out of our own organic growth of revenue minus finance bill, we'll still be able to hit it?
2.917 billion, 2.197 trillion, that was the target. Obviously, it comes lower. You knock off 44.3 billion, so those are the numbers we're working with. So as it is right now, the revised estimates in ordinary revenue will be pretty much assuming organic growth. And if you look at even the nominal GDP growth from FY that was baked in FY 23-24, and into FY 24-25 is around 12%. That's the nominal growth. So rough estimate is that they expect that even the revenue from the last financial year, we're looking at 2.2 trillion to 2.6 trillion If it's around 12%, that's given.
Yeah.
That's pretty much organic growth. But then again, looking at the numbers, looking at even some of the tax proposals, Finance Act 2023, I think you guys were the ones, I saw a news item to the effect that they just made 61%
Yes.
in the first 11 months. So that tells you, are our revenue projections they are really ambitious. They are not penciling in a realistic environment. So that's the challenging bit. That said, and the other thing that we are keeping an eye on is now the KRA 9th corporate plan. So basically, it used to be 3-year plans. The last one was from FY 2020-21 up until the last financial year, 23-24. So we're expecting another one, but rather than a 3-year plan, is a 5-year plan. They normally give their estimates in terms of where they'll collect the targeted amount that they will want to collect in the next 5 years, now in this case. And also they do a SWOT analysis, even the numbers of KRA taxpayers that they will want to net into the system. So those kind of things is what will guide us as to how they will now be able to even meet some of these revenue targets.
I see. Chachi Logutu, thank you so much for your time this morning, and we appreciate your insights on supplementary budget.
Thank you, sir.
We have been speaking to Chachi Logutu, economist from IC Group, digging into matters regarding the Supplementary Appropriations Bill. Public participation has just kicked off, and we want to see how Kenyans engage with this. We have until the 22nd of July, so be sure to send your comments. We shall keep flagging any emerging issues as and when they unfold, so stay tuned to Business Redefined.